Freedom Rides, exploring the road to equality,
Encountering Hate,
exchanging Jim Crow for freedom,
by Ali Studding,
and Allie Watkins.
1960. In a Jim Crow-infested, segregated, and hate-filled South, African Americans lived as second-class citizens. Slow acceptance of every civil rights demonstration and achievement made it difficult for the civil rights movement to move forward. Example.
The 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision desegregated public schools.
But with the inclusion of the phrase, with all deliberate speed, freedom remained a dream.
February 1st, 1960, a lunch counter sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina stood as the groundwork for a resurgence of efforts to move civil rights forward.
But the arrests and brutal attacks of over 1,500 sit-in students did not change Jim Crow laws. Freedom remained a dream.
The social aspects of segregation,
Discrimination and hate were pervasive.
Jim Crow was alive and well in the South. The 1960 Supreme Court ruling of Boynton versus Virginia made denial of interstate travel because of someone's color illegal, but it took a group of racially integrated individuals,
The Freedom Riders, to bring about attention to the horrific conditions in the South, as well as to dare the federal government to carry out their legal obligations.
The Jim Crow culture violently confronted the Freedom Riders with attacks by the Ku Klux Klan, racist citizens, and white authority.
In early 1961, the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, sponsored the Freedom Rides. James Farmer, president of CORE, began recruiting riders from across the nation, black, white, men, and women. Meet Genevieve Hughes Houghton, a white female freedom rider from the South.
I figured Southern women should be represented so that the South and the nation would realize that all Southern people don't think alike. Before the rides, we had to be trained. Nonviolence was key. We would not respond with physical encounter. A training session went something like this. I'd like a cup of coffee, please.
Now, I don't want any of your kind in here. You and your sympathizing with those Negroes, you're a disgrace to the white race.
I'd like a cup of coffee, please.
Where are you from?
I am from the United States. After months of training, the Freedom Rides were ready to begin. On May 4th, 1961, they departed from Washington, D.C. on a Trailways and a Greyhound bus, intending to reach New Orleans on May 17th to celebrate the 7th anniversary of the Brown versus Board decision.
May 8, 1961. The Freedom Riders arrived in Rock Hill, South Carolina. This is the first city in which the Freedom Riders would encounter violence.
No, please! Please, for me, please! Please, oh God, John Allen, please stop hurting me!
John Lewis, Albert Bigelow, and Genevieve Houghton were beaten.
After our stop in Rock Hill, we knew this was real. Rock Hill, our ride, our exploration of the Deep South was gaining media attention, and that's when I realized something. You gotta get hurt for it to make it to the news.
May 14, 1961, Mother's Day. The Freedom Riders arrived in Anniston, Alabama. Local Ku Klux Klan leader Kenneth Adams found out about the Freedom Riders' arrival and organized a hostile encounter.
I looked out the window to see a mob of 200 angry, white, racist individuals.
Klansmen, filled with hate in our hearts, carrying knives, pipes, bricks, and chains in our hands.
We couldn't stop at this bus terminal. The threat was too high.
That bus took off. But we followed. We followed for 6 miles.
They're throwing stones at the windows in the South. The bus, the windows were breaking.
Finally, we were able to.
And they slashed the back 2 tires.
And the bus stopped.
And so did my heart. As we tried to protect ourselves from those trying to get inside, I heard someone yell, "Mom!" Smoke filled the air in my lungs, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to burn us up. Somehow, I found myself off the bus and on the ground, but I can't tell you if I walked off that bus, if I crawled off, or if someone pulled me off. Water! Someone give me water!
You all right, ma'am? Glad to hear.
The encounters, they were only getting worse.
Although the Riders' Greyhound bus was stopped at Anniston, the Riders' Trailways bus was able to move on to Birmingham, a city synonymous with hate and racism. Police Commissioner of Public Safety, Bull Connor, found out about the Freedom Riders' arrival, but instructed the police force to hold off for 15 minutes, while the KKK left the Riders bloody and battered.
After the attacks in Birmingham, newspapers, radio stations, and news stations entered homes across America.
They knocked one man, a white man, down at my feet, and they beat him and they kicked him until his face was a bloody red pulp. The police did not arrive until 15 minutes late, when the men had, if on signal, dispersed and gone further down the street, where I saw some of them discussing their achievements of the day right underneath the windows of the police commissioner's office.
For the Kennedy brothers, the Freedom Riders stood as an afterthought and a nuisance during the Cold War era. President John F. Kennedy was quoted complaining to Harris Wofford, Justice Department official involved in the Civil Rights Movement.
Can't you get your goddamn friends off them buses? Stop them.
Our friends and allies were appalled that this was taking place in the United States. America was not living up to its promise of liberty and justice for all.
After the brutal attacks in Anniston and Birmingham, 9 out of the 13 Freedom Riders were hospitalized. James Peck suffered a crack to the head, resulting in 53 stitches. Genevieve Houghton visited James Peck in the hospital that next morning. Genevieve, we have to continue the rise. We must not surrender to violence.
James, I am no longer this fearless rider. We are no longer these fearless riders. James, don't you appreciate being alive?
Well, yes, but don't you see what we're doing here, Genevieve? People know who we are. We're on the TVs.
James, there's no more bus drivers willing to finish the ride with us. We already have a flight scheduled to New Orleans, and we leave tomorrow. Wouldn't you be rather blown up in a plane than be beaten to death?
On May 15, 1961, the Freedom Riders arrived in New Orleans by plane, and the riots came to a stop. However, activists within the National Student Movement did not want to see the riots discontinue. Diane Nash, one of National Student Movement's most respected and effective leader, knew that the riots were necessary.
It was clear to me that if the Freedom Rides were stopped at that point, just after so much violence had been inflicted, that the message would have been sent that all you need to do to stop a non-violent campaign is inflict massive violence.
So the National Student Ride began. 10 volunteers departed from Nashville, Tennessee, and made their way for Montgomery, Alabama. This fresh group of riders would soon encounter the largest mob yet.
This is eerie. Where is everyone?
I don't know, but I don't have a good feeling about this.
Well, maybe they got the message. Maybe things have changed.
Do you see that? Do you see those men? They're beating up on that tower.
And that one too. All of the reporters are being beaten. They're smashing their cameras on the ground. Bus drivers, stop!
They're coming for the bus, Diane. They're coming for the bus. Baseball bats, pipes. That man's even got a pitchfork.
Everyone start praying and remember to stay non-violent. We have to brace ourselves.
The attack that day was a violent mob of 300 against a non-violent group of 10. Police stood by, watched the violence, and did nothing. The Kennedy brothers were now dissatisfied with Southern local law enforcement and consequently sent 400 U.S. Marshals to enter into Montgomery. John Patterson, governor of Alabama, opposed the U.S. Marshals entering into the city. However, the riders were dedicated to this cause. They would take the harassment.
They would take the beatings.
They would even take death. The riders were going to keep riding until anybody could ride anywhere they wanted in the South.
June of 1961, the rides continued. Hundreds of people from across the United States were joining this exploration for equal rights, riding buses in order to fill Southern jails. Many riders were forced into Mississippi's infamous Parchman Penitentiary, where they experienced dehumanizing conditions and torture.
Through integrated exploration, vicious and violent encounters, and the exchange of Jim Crow for freedom, the coalition of the 436 Freedom Riders opened the doors to a racist, segregated, hate-filled South. In August of 1961, the riots came to a stop as activists waited for a federal government ruling on interstate travel.
September 22nd, 1961, the Interstate Commerce Commission outlawed segregation of all interstate transportation in the United States. The Freedom Riders' exploration challenging the Jim Crow laws of interstate travel paved a road to a resurgence of action in the civil rights movement.
The Freedom Riders persevered until Jim Crow was exchanged for freedom. Despite tremendous gain made by the civil rights movement, the United States still continues to struggle to uphold the ideals, goals, and leadership on which the civil rights movement was founded. For example, racially biased incarceration rates.
While people of color make up 30% of the United States population, they account for 60% of those imprisoned.
1 in every 15 African American men are incarcerated, while only 1 in every 106 white men are incarcerated.
These discrepancies are not only seen with prison statistics, but also in education. Today, 53% of black students attend schools in which at least 9 out of 10 students are minorities.
Embedded hate, poverty, and prejudice make the progression of the civil rights movement difficult.
To move forward in our fight for acceptance, equality, and love,
We must remember, not only to remember, but to dedicate our lives to continuing this exploration of equality begun by a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens.
the Freedom Riders. Thank you.